Welcome to Zach's Contraptions, your source for everything Rube Goldberg. Today, I'm here to talk to you about my experience on the Italian show Tu Sei Che Valles. Now, you probably have never heard of that. Let me be honest, I hadn't heard of it either. Most people are going to be familiar with America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent, but this is Italy's version, and it is, let's just say, it's on a whole nother level of crazy. And I experienced that for sure. It definitely presented more challenges than I think I've ever run across in a Rube Goldberg machine because I didn't have my normal kit with me. I was able to bring with me one suitcase. Tu Sei Che Valles reached out via the Rube Goldberg Institute looking for a Rube Goldberg machine, something that they've never had in Italy before. Nobody out there besides myself does these live shows of where you build the machine and then you perform it in front of a live audience. And so they reached out to the Institute, and Rube Goldberg Institute contacted me. I looked at that email and there wasn't a doubt in my mind. I think I replied within maybe 5 minutes upon getting it. I just wrote the big words, yes. I said yes, and then I definitely got the pit in my stomach of, oh God, what did I just sign up for? I don't have a team. I don't have anybody else. It's just going to be me there. How am I going to ship a machine across to Italy? Is that even going to be possible? Come to find out that, 15 million viewers watch this program on a regular basis. Okay, so it's insanely popular, which means that I've got to be insanely good. I've broken Guinness World Records before. You know, if you're not familiar with my other videos, check out my 300-step Guinness World Record machine. It took me and my team 9 months, 5,000 hours to get right. With this project, I only had roughly 6 weeks to come up with a design, let them know what the design was, and ultimately what we decided on was I wasn't going to be able to build anything in the States and ship it over. It was just going to be too expensive. But instead, I need to arrive in Italy several days before my performance, and I've got to assemble this thing on the spot before we go on. So I had to create this gigantic list of materials, send it to them in advance, and I had to rely on a runner for the show. What I basically told them was, we're going to create an impromptu machine. Whatever parts you find me, I'm just going to have to live with, and I'm going to have to create a contraption out of those parts. They want to prove that your act is going to work. They want to make sure that you're worthy to go. And I had to tell them, that doesn't work that way with Rube Goldberg machines. I have to invent this from scratch on the spot. I don't even know if this is doable because I've never tried this in a foreign country on my own. And I was upfront with my producer, but he trusted me enough. I trusted myself like 90% of the way, so, why shouldn't he? I'm packed with my little dinky suitcase. The day of the flight comes up and I'm sweating bullets. I'm terrified. I'll be honest, I'm thinking I don't know if I can actually do this. I made it. Made it to Rome. That was a long trip. I'm tired. I need to go to bed because bright and early tomorrow I get started on this machine, and I am very sleep deprived at the moment.
On the other hand, I really want to experience Rome because,
I made it. I'm exhausted. I've been up 30 hours. And the greatest news possible, all of my equipment made it through TSA, I think. I haven't checked everything. They clearly went through my bag. It was one of the little letter thingies. They took pity on me because I wrote a little letter explaining what on earth I was doing, bringing screws and washers and bolts and quick releases to Italy for. So far, so good. Fingers crossed. I need to sleep, and then tomorrow is the first day in studio, so let's keep this momentum alive. There's no momentum in my face right now. I'm gonna crash. I'm gonna go find pizza, probably a second pizza, and then I'm gonna start building, so see how that goes. So then I keep forgetting every time I go to Italy. Restaurants don't open until late, like 7:30 p.m. It's stupendous because I've not eaten anything except airplane food for the last 24 hours. Also, I'm on a very busy road, and I don't think there's a grocery store nearby, though. The space, the amount of room that I have for this project was roughly 40 feet by 30 feet. I give or take 10 feet in the air. I could go higher if I wanted. And he sent me a picture of all the materials I requested in a single room. They might have fit in the space right behind me. I'm looking at this and I'm going, that's not enough. How am I going to fill that gigantic space? And when I get to Italy, what am I going to do? It's not like I'm not getting a rental car. They're driving me to the studio on the outskirts of Rome. That was another big factor, is that when I went there, when I just looked up on the map where it is, they said, yeah, we film in Rome, Italy. I was like, oh, cool. I'll get to see the Colosseum. I'll be able to swing by the Trevi Fountain, after a day's hard work. Where the heart of Rome is and where the studio is, it was an hour away from the heart of Rome. And that meant there are no materials nearby. So when I'm trying to find more materials, I'm dealing with either what's on the production site, begging somebody to pick something up for me. Because again, what am I going to do when I get there? I was nervous. And there's a plan for this Rube Goldberg machine. Does the plan really include the, what am I going to do? How am I going to build this? No. I know that I want a bicycle to deliver a pizza, which is going to cause a wig to get thrown at a judge, and so on and so forth. The contraption that I came up with, for Tu Sei Che Vale, they have 5 judges, 5 different panelists who they provide either a yes or no where they're going to make it. Very similar to America's Got Talent. My goal is that I want to impress each and every one of them. To be a Rube Goldberg, it's got to have the 4 things. It's got to have a task. It's got to have everyday objects. It's got to be a chain reaction, of course, but it's got to be funny and ridiculous. That last one's really incredibly important when it comes to this. I showed up at the studio and they wouldn't even let me in. I couldn't communicate with them of who I was, anything like that. I'm sitting there trying to get on the phone with my producer and he's not answering. I'm trying to tell them who I am, what I'm there for, because I had a whole conversation with production. I need unrestricted access on this set. I've got to be able to move around. And finally, I get picked up and finally I get into the studio. And of course, then I have to sign about an hour's worth of paperwork. Everyone has to do this. I'm wasting time. I need to get going. I'm finally in here. I'm late as it is already. I only had 5 days to put this contraption together by myself. 5 days to start from scratch, to have no tools, to have no parts, and to fill a 40-foot by 30-foot area with a Rube Goldberg machine. It was daunting. I did the paperwork. Finally got a hold of my producer. He gave me the tour around and I looked at the space. And it's one thing to say 40 feet by 30 feet. But when you look at this stage completely blank and bare, I nearly ran away because when I went to look at my pile of materials, it looked even smaller than it did in the pictures. It was such an insignificant amount of items. I didn't know what I was going to do. The very first thing was just gather all of those items, bring it to the stage, set up my little workstation, and try to get going. And of course, I get hit in the gut another time. Not everything that I requested is there. I was missing screws, I was missing hardware, I didn't have a drill. One entire page of my entire materials list was missing. So I had to wrangle somebody and we went to what is basically the Italian version of a Home Depot. It must have been funny as anything for anybody walking around because this production assistant who went with me, he spoke English amazingly. He did a fantastic job and he put up with me. So we walked away with 1,600 euros worth of materials, screws, hardware, tools, everything like that. And of course, it dawns on me, like I'm in such panic mode, but also so thrilled that I've got somebody working with me. I forgot something. This guy drives a Fiat. We narrowly squeezed all of my items into this tiny little Fiat. So that first day, set up everything, I lay it out, I get the plan, and one of the first stages that I do with these builds is I'll just take those materials. Like I said, I had this room full of materials just sitting there. And I say room full, it was like a quarter full. I set it out on the stage and I laid it out like I did my drawing, like just the doodle. By the time I unboxed the tools, by the time I'd finished talking with the stage manager, by the time I'd laid everything out, it was 9 o'clock on top of sleep deprived, on top of just everything stress-inducing that day. I had nothing left in me. And not to mention, it's 100 degrees. I lost an entire day today trying to just even get it set up. I had planned on this being the first build day, putting sheets of plywood down. I come to find out that they don't have the sheets of plywood painted for me. It's just going to be raw plywood down there. To say that I slept that night would be a lie. I sat there just staring at the ceiling. I thought, should I run away? Should I just go home? Obviously, my producer, he wants perfection. He wants this thing to go perfectly on TV. But he's also told me that I only get one take. This is in front of a live audience, in front of the judges who have never seen this before. It's not like we're going to reset everything if it goes wrong. You're only going to get the one shot on TV. If I'm going to fail, I want to make the coolest thing possible. If it's going to turn out a failure, let's just have fun with it. Let's just enjoy the experience. I woke up the next morning and I went down to breakfast. I get over to the studio and the person who is supposed to be guiding me, he's already there. I'm 15 minutes early. He guides me right in and he's so invested. And he's sitting there and he's like, what do you need help with? We're going to have a great day. And instantly, when he said something, people around him got things done. He turned to somebody and in Italian, he apparently said, bring sheets of plywood. And by God, 5 minutes later, we had sheets of plywood. We were laying it down. He was looking around saying, okay, what else do you need? And so he starts gathering all the lumber, all the pieces that I need to get it going. He started cutting the pieces. I started assembling everything, getting it up there. We put the pieces of the Parmesan back and ended up starting with the carpet roll, where the final element is something that you're gonna have to find out when you watch the whole video, by the way. We started putting the final element where there was this carpet that needed unraveled to reveal the final gift. With it, we got that done. I needed a fan, which the fan that the production assistant that got me was terrible. And he looks around the set and he goes, that one better? And I explain what I need to do with it. And he's like, he just comes back with pieces of metal. He's an Italian version of me. It was amazing because he knew the parts that I needed. And by the end of the day, we had the pillars up, or this flag that was getting transitioned down. We had the fan rotating. There was a carpet that's going to unroll. And we had already started on the football element. There's 5 different modules in this machine for the different judges. So there was a module dedicated to each of the 5 of them. Already at the end of day 1, we built 2 of them. And he had one more gift for me that day, in that he looked at the wood and he looked at me and he's like, do you want this painted? I was like, yeah, we have an artist on site who she can paint this for you. That's the last piece of the puzzle, because I thought the last day I was gonna have to sit there and paint everything myself. One thing to build it, but to decorate it and make it look good for TV, that's a rule. I went home that night. I had probably the best night's sleep I had the entire trip, knowing that I'd already finished 2/5 of the project. It was just such a 180 from the first night to the second of, should I run away, to this is gonna work. And the next 2 days, same thing. Finished the next 2 modules, got those up and running. Jerry module, whereby there's a bicycle that goes down. The pizza delivery gag. There was supposed to be a pizza that flew out the front, and it just wasn't enough momentum, but just kind of going back and forth with his production member, and just because, you know what, he couldn't stay away. He kept having other jobs. I would see him carrying things, and he'd just set them down, and he'd come over to me, and we would just doodle. The judges, the people who I'm ultimately trying to impress, are pretty far away from this contraption. And this platform is raised up. Fun fact as well, this entire platform, that 40 by 30 I keep mentioning, is on a wheel. When it came time for the performance, what's actually going to happen is that whole stage had to move into place before the judges. I got down to that last day, the dominoes, the musical instruments were in place. I had the tracks. It was time. It was, the 5 days had passed. I would say the first 2 days went really slow, and then the next 3 leading up to the performance flew by. The next day was the performance, and the whole thing starts filming at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And in fact, the night before we did rehearsal, and all the acts were coming through when they were rehearsing and they were bringing their things, and I had the machine tested, I had it ready to go, and I'm the very last one, and they roll the whole machine. We do a practice run. We roll the thing into place, and I give my practice. I practice my speech, making sure that, I could understand with the translator, which we'll get to that in a minute. That was the hardest part. After everything that I just said, we haven't even dealt with the hardest part yet. And they had me run the machine 5 times, and it works perfectly. Any guesses? Leave a guess in the comment. It worked perfectly 4 out of 5 times. It was incredible. This 45-step Rube Goldberg machine. For it to have rolled out there, it actually traveled roughly about 20 yards, rolling forward, built in just 4.5 days. And for it to work perfectly 4 out of 5 times, finally, we're done with the rehearsals. It was roughly 1:30 in the morning. Went back. Thank God restaurants stay open late in Italy. They had my food ready, cold, because I didn't tell them I was going to be rehearsing that night. The next day, I arrive super early, get there. I tweak what I can by 10 a.m. You've ever worked with the Rube Goldberg machine? What's the time difference between when you reset it to the time that you run it? This thing had to be reset at roughly 1 o'clock, and then I had to vacate the stage. I had to set every last single component. While this team came in, they put GoPros all over the machine. They had to start walking around, getting the lights set up, everything of sorts, and I couldn't be there. I could not be around my contraption. All of that elation, all of that from the night before, instantly brought me back to the first day. Brought me back to the moment where, oh God, this is gonna fail on TV, and it's out of my control at this point because people are wandering around on the machine after it's been set. With the big contraption, getting it set up, that was kind of one of the hardest things. So I got to go first, which meant, I got to leave first at the end of the day. After hours and hours of building and through all these many trials and all these issues, everything like that, it was showtime. I alluded a little bit as to what the hardest challenge of all this was. Obviously the building, was a big challenge. Obviously, trying to find the parts was a challenge. I dabbed on it a couple times, the language barrier. I have to talk to the judges and the audience in English. I don't know Italian. I didn't learn Italian well enough for this event. I'm speaking to them, and there's a voice in the sky, translator, who is then speaking to all of them, translating what I'm saying. And he's about 2 seconds behind me with what I'm saying. I'm talking with a big giant voice booming over me. Tu sei che vale, as I mentioned, is a very chaotic show. And so, right in the middle of mine, the judges start talking. They interrupt my performance, which was never mentioned to me at one point, at any single point in this. What happens is, they're talking, and whenever they talk, I don't understand them because they're speaking in Italian. So I have a translator in my ear who is translating everything that they're saying. And of course, there's the delay. They talk over each other. There's a lot of people talking because there's the 5 judges, there's 3 panelists, there's, I think there's a host, roaming about, and that's 8 voices, and I've only got 1 translator. I'm talking, then their voice starts talking, they start talking, which I have to stop talking, and there's a voice in my ear translating what it is, but then I need to start talking in order to communicate with them so that there's not a big gap. And so it's just everybody's talking over each other. And I'm trying to process what they're saying via basically their facial reactions and what they're saying. And I'm trying to just, make a face and then catch up with the process. It was challenging. Not to mention the fact of when it actually came time for the performance. I had to stay 2 seconds ahead of what the machine was going to do. If I'm trying to explain something or mention it, I've got to say it 2 seconds in advance so that the voice in the sky can tell it to them at the right moment. So after all of that, all of the issues, all of the translations, everything like that, it's time. It's time to see what all of this has been about.
Here we go. Questo è il regalo di Jerry.
Now, I'm betting after all of that, you want to see the final run, don't you? Stay tuned because the full video translated will be posted on my channel coming up very soon. Very, very excited to show you that, but I really just wanted to get my story across and just build that excitement so that you understand, because this was a process. This was a gigantic, monumental, Herculean effort. It would not have been possible just by myself. The kindness and generosity of the set and the people there really made it feasible for me to present a machine in front of the judges. I was okay with failure, but I want a perfect run. I want this thing to look good on camera. Do you think it worked? Do you think it went well? Leave your guess in the comments. Again, that full video will be posted coming up. Stay tuned for that. I'm so glad to have shared my story with all of you. It was incredibly stressful, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's an experience that I'm going to add it to my shelf of memories back there, and I look back on it fondly. I hope this story emphasizes that it was incredibly stressful, but incredibly worth it. I'm Zach with Zach's Contraptions. Stay tuned for more.